Okay, a couple quick short announcements. We haven't taken a registration of everyone here yet. We want to be able to do that. So if you haven't registered and paid your $10, we'll take care of that around noon time. John's probably going to head that up. Also, if you registered and paid and all that stuff, you still need to check with John so you can get checked off on the list. At that time, he's also going to give you a raffle ticket for our raffle at the end of the day. So you want to make sure you hang around for that. There's always some good prizes, and that should be kind of fun. So let's go ahead and move on to the next presentation. Martin Boss. Martin is Principal Security Consultant for Accuvant Labs Attack and Penetration Team with multiple years of experience in information technology. Martin specializes in black box penetration testing, social engineering, physical security testing, and red team engagement. I thought you didn't like the red team thing.
I don't, but they make you put that shit in your bio.
Oh, okay. Martin is the core developer of Kali Linux project and one of the founders of DerbyCon Security Conference held in Louisville, Kentucky annually. Everyone put their hands together. Martin.
All right. Thanks for that great introduction I wrote. No. Anyway, so like I said, I'm Martin, and I'm super glad they asked me to talk here. When Robert first contacted me about talking here, he had mentioned that perhaps maybe I could do a talk about explaining the new Kali Linux. And so if nobody knows what that is, that's what I'm going to talk about and how we got there. If you already know all about it and what it is, this might be boring. Sorry. But anyway, so we already went over this. This is kind of just a little bit about me. The only other thing that's not in my bio is me and my partner Alex do have a website, questiondefense.com. It's just technical questions, technical answers. It's not totally security related. It's basically anything. We try to write an article every day just about any IT problem. There's really complex password cracking stuff on there. There's really stupid stuff on there, like I can't update my iPhone. But it's for everybody. And if you want to contact me, there's I'm on the Twitters and my email address, if that I spelled wrong. It's actually supposed to be Cali.org. Oops. All right, so who's heard of Backtrack? Awesome. So Backtrack was a penetration testing distro that originally started between, I'll give a little bit of a history lesson. So years ago in 2005, there was a couple penetration testing distros, and live CDs had just gotten really big at that time. The way that Wax came about was Mutz, which is our founding member of Backtrack. He was on an engagement in a government organization, and when he got there, they said, no, you can't bring your computer in here. And then he said, well, can I just install some of the tools I need on your computer? And they said, no, you can't touch any of our computers either. And so they were sort of in a pickle at that point. And so at that point, Knoppix and the whole live CD thing had just gotten really big. So what they ended up doing was he gave the people at the government installation a list of tools. And what they would do every morning was they would burn him this live CD, and he would use the live CD to work all day, and then they would destroy it before he left to make sure that he didn't take any information back and forth. And so every day he was adding more tools and stuff that he wanted, and at the end of the engagement he was like, wow, this is pretty cool, I could use this on everything. And so we ended up starting, it actually started out as WAPix, which standed for White Hat Knoppix, and then merged into Wax, which stands for White Hat Slacks, obviously. So a little history lesson, and then there was another gentleman named Max Moser from Germany who had the Auditor security collection. Anybody in here ever use Auditor? Couple people. You guys are old. No. So then there was the Auditor security collection. There was actually one more gentleman that was an original founding member, and his name was Martin Munich. And so we used to affectionately refer to them as the 3 M's back in the day. And that project was sponsored by a website called remoteexploit.org. It's still there, run by Max Moser. They still do a lot of research stuff. Anyway, so it's a little bit of a history lesson. This real quick, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this, but this is just sort of a timeline so you can see how long Backtrack has been around. Our first release was on February 5th, 2006, which was the version 1.0 beta. I started with the project in 2007, which is when Backtrack 2 Final came out. And then we had all of this stuff. What you can see here, what's important about this is you can notice around the Backtrack 4 and the Backtrack 5 time, we started to come out with a lot of R2s, R1s, R3s, and all that kind of stuff. And the reason for that was because of the way that we had the distro set up, which we're going to talk about a little bit, or the reason for the move to Debian, because of the way we had the distro set up, it was really difficult to streamline updates. And so, like your popular Linux distros, you can do apt-get update or apt-get whatever, and it pulls down the new kernel and the new version and all that stuff. We were never able to get all the pen test tools working right and be able to do that all at the same time on some of the platforms that we were using. We've been on several different platforms, Slacks, Knoppix, Slacks, Ubuntu, and then now Debian. So we had a lot of criticisms about Backtrack. They're not all here. Some of them were nonsense. Oh, yes?
Could you kind of explain how you originally got involved with Backtrack?
Sure. So kind of a funny story. So originally I got involved in computer security kind of like a lot of people. I did not go to school for it or anything like that. I used to be a sound engineer and I would be on the road all the time. And at that time, there was people were just starting to protect their Wi-Fi access points. There were years when they were open and we would go to these venues to play, and they would always have protected access points. And so originally I got into security researching, like a lot of people do, how to get into protected Wi-Fi access points. Not because I wanted to do anything wrong, but I just wanted to have internet on the road, right? And so I ended up getting involved with it, and I met Mutz, and I became a moderator on the forums. He taught me pretty much everything I know about Linux, and became a developer shortly after that. So probably not the same career path as a lot of other people, but that's how I got there. So these are some of the key points of criticism on Backtrack. The main one was that we were not FHS compliant. So anybody that uses Linux on a regular basis probably knows what FHS compliant means. If you don't, Linux has what's called a file hierarchy standards, which basically means that the root level file system must be a certain way, and if you add a directory, the entire Linux community will shun you forever. And so basically what we did, anybody that knows Backtrack, is we added our own /pentest directory in the root. We did that in order to organize the tools better so that people could go to the folder of the task that they were wanting to perform and see all of the tools that related to that. I'll talk about some more problems with that, but the main criticism was that we weren't compliant with that system. There was a couple other things. There were a lot of outdated tools and tool dependency issues because of the file system hierarchy standard, because things weren't. So in Linux, when you install something, it installs the libraries in the correct place and it creates the links for you. But when you put your tool somewhere completely different, that means that you have to manually create those links to the libraries. And when you're talking about 350 tools, it can turn into a disaster, I promise. So there was also some slow updating of Git and Subversion tools. I'll talk about that too, but there's a lot of tools that update all the time, like every day. And so we didn't have a really good way to automate the updating of those tools, right? So we would have to manually do it. And I don't know about you, but I would build as much stuff as I could, but it's difficult to update something like SQL map or something every single day, right? So it was difficult. So there was that. We had a lot of complaints about it being based off Ubuntu. You could call it the noob distro or whatever, but we chose Ubuntu because it works. It works better than any other Linux distro. The downside is it has a lot of restrictions that the developers put on it, and they put a lot of nonsense on it. So for people like us that totally customize a distro, it was extremely difficult to work with Ubuntu. The other problem is, and I'm not bashing Ubuntu because I think it's a great Linux distro, the other problem is that they upstream Ubuntu is totally unreceptive to bug reports from people that aren't Ubuntu developers. So we submitted tons and tons and tons of fixes for their stuff, and they never implemented any of them. So we were not happy about that. ARM devices, we did have support for ARM devices on Backtrack 5, but our build machine was a Motorola Zoom. So that was all we could afford at the time. I don't know if anyone's tried to buy an ARM compiler, but they cost an arm and a leg. And so we didn't have that. So and we abandoned that after a while, even though there's a lot of ARM, and we'll talk about that. And then the other big problem was that people always wanted a different desktop. They wanted to be able to build their own image. They wanted to be able to, companies would say, well, I only need these tools and I only need these tools. We also had a lot of government installations that said, we can't use your stuff because of several reasons. One, we weren't GPG signing our packages, and then two, they wanted to be able to build their own distro so that they could say, yes, we vetted this, we built it, all the packages are GPG signed, this is secure, we can use it in our government installation. So, yes.
Is it open software?
Yes.
Okay.
So we follow the Debian standard. So what we do is we have the different directories. So we have the main directory, which contains all of the source, free open source tools, all of that stuff. Then we have the same as Debian and Ubuntu, we have a non-free, which is tools that don't contain the source or are just binaries or whatever restrictions the developers may put on the tool. So those all go into non-free basically. All right, so when we were talking about Backtrack 6, the development team's pretty small, I'll go over it, but when we were talking about Backtrack 6, what we did was we all made a wish list of the things that we wanted to incorporate into Backtrack 6, right? And we wanted to really come out with something new, because at that point for Backtrack 4 and 5, we were just adding some tools, changing the wallpaper, all that kind of stuff, right? It wasn't really anything, anything shocking. And when a new version of something comes out, you want to do something really cool, but there's only so many tools, there's only so much stuff, right? So what we did was we thought about, where else can we take this? We were on a 4-year-old development architecture, which is Ubuntu 10.04. That's the other reason that I don't like Ubuntu. I feel like they come out with too many versions too quick that don't work with old versions, right? So I'm not a big fan of that. So I like the Linux distros better, that CentOS, Red Hat. I don't mind if they use older packages as long as they're patched correctly, right? And that's on us to apply the security updates. But I kind of like older stuff that works sometimes, rather than, I'm a big advocate of CentOS for web servers, right? So it may be old, but it's all patched and works. Anyway, so here's some of our developer wish list, right? We wanted to be able to streamline the kernel updates. That was the biggest thing. We were not in a position to build a new kernel and send it down properly. The main reason for this was our own fault, because of the pen test directory and all kinds of other stuff, right? Not following the file hierarchy standard created a lot of issues. It also created 10 times more work for us. But we also wanted to move from Subversion to Get. We were using Subversion at the time, and we were also not fully giving out every single piece of source of our stuff. So we had kernel patches that weren't in the Subversion tree, that kind of thing. So we wanted to go fully open source with any patch. We write a lot of patches for other people's tools to make them work for our standards. And so slowly over time, we wanted to make all those patches available. And so we used to try to, there was a time when we would try to submit all those patches and then they wouldn't take them, then we gave up, but we wanted to go back to that. And so I'll talk about that in a minute. We wanted to be able to GPG sign all our packages. They're signed by the developer's GPG key, and they're also signed by the BuildBot's GPG key. So that makes it a little bit more secure. We wanted to bring back ARM support because there are so many ARM pen testing devices. I'm going to talk about that. We wanted to rebuild our entire internal infrastructure. That's our internal network that we build all this stuff on, right? It was getting old. We were using Subversion, we were using Redmine for bug tracking, and nobody was really using it because it was all complicated. And so we wanted to do that. We wanted to keep the Dragon. Everybody loves the Backtrack Dragon. And so the main thing we wanted is this FHS compliance, right? We wanted all the purists of Linux to quit crying. So we scrapped it all, right? Started totally over. And that's basically all that we did. The only thing that we probably kept from Backtrack 5 is the tool list, right? And yes?
Was this about 2007?
No, so this is just last year. This just came out on March. Yeah, so I can go back to the timeline later if you want to look. But so we've had 5 Backtrack versions, several revisions, and then so last year at the beginning of the year is sort of when all this started. This was about a year in the making, and we released it in March of this year at Black Hat Europe. That's the other reason for this talk is we realized that none of us ever did an official talk about the release of this. So this is it. So. Anyway, So massive restructuring of the internal network, right? And so that is important because that's where you update from, right? Those are our repositories. Those are our our source trees, our bug tracker, all that stuff that the community, our forums, all of that stuff that the community uses. Those are all things there. And so while that doesn't have anything to do with pen testing, I guarantee you the user experience is really important, right? If you can't update your stuff, anyway. So the big question, Ubuntu versus Debian, right? I don't want to get into a bunch of distro politics because they're both good distros. I just want to highlight some of the main reasons that we moved from Ubuntu was some of the new stuff that they were implementing to make it more user-friendly, right? So Unity and Mur was the main thing, right? They're going to a totally different X Windows system type of thing. And because of all the tools that depend on, GUI tools that depend on the old stuff, there was no way we were messing with that. This whole stuff you can't remove, like the Ubuntu One Cloud, their new software management thing. And that stuff's probably great for new users or people transitioning from Windows to Linux or whatever. There's nothing wrong with any of that stuff. It just doesn't work for a pen testing distro, so it had to go. And also, Ubuntu is basically based off Debian. So Debian's a little bit more of a stable platform. It has a little bit more of a what I like to call the old Linux gurus, back Debian. And so we looked into their process of becoming a Debian package maintainer, which is extremely difficult. I mean, they do person-to-person interviews and all this stuff, just to be able to maintain one Debian package. So we like that. The other thing that we really liked is that they are receptive to bugs. They actually say thanks and implement them when you send them to them, right? So we did have a couple of challenges. Georgia was just complaining about this. Lots of people have classes and training and stuff based on Backtrack, right? It's been the #1 pen test distro for a long time. And so even, Mutz's company, our sponsors, Offensive Security, all of their training is based on Backtrack, right? So we wanted to make sure that we made as little a transition as possible into that, while still fulfilling our wish list. So that was a big deal. And then people were always asking, is Backtrack 5 still supported? No. So the reason for that is there was no reason to support it, right? It still works. I mean, none of the tools are getting updates or anything like that, but there was no reason to support it. We wanted to focus all our efforts on the new thing. Uh-oh, better hurry up. So everybody wants to know why we did a new name and didn't just call it Backtrack 6. Basically because, like I just talked about, we scrapped everything, and so we thought it justified a new name. Then everybody wants to know what Kali means. If you look on the internets, it means all this cool stuff. That didn't have anything to do with the name. We actually just thought of it and then looked up what it meant. So there's nothing at all in the name except for it sounds cool. So, the same core development team, right? The same people that were at the core of the Backtrack development process are still involved in this. So it's Mutz, Dookie, me, and then Crossbower. He's Italian. And then we got a couple of more people. The main thing that we did is we brought on this guy, Raphael. And so he is not a pen tester, but what he is a Debian consultant. And so we had him come on, and he works on several Debian packages. He's a maintainer. He works on the core. He does all this stuff with Debian. And so who better than to come over and help us build our environment right from scratch? Something that we learned from Backtrack 5 was when 3 people decide to build an Ubuntu development environment that have never used Ubuntu before, it's not good. None of us I used Gentoo, Mutz used something else. None of us used Ubuntu when we decided to go to the Ubuntu platform, right? So we rebuilt our dev environment several times, and so we wanted to avoid that. So we brought in somebody that knew what they were doing. So Raphael is awesome. He helps us fix all our packages, that kind of stuff. And then one of the guys that works at Akivant, Eric, came on too. All right, so what did we change, right? So these are a couple of the small things that we changed. We removed a bunch of stuff. One of the things that was a problem in Backtrack 5 was we didn't really have a tool vetting process, right? People would say this tool is cool, and we'd be like, oh, that's cool, and we'd add it, right? And there wasn't a whole vetting process where we could say, is there something else that already does this? And so tools would get added because one of our friends wrote it, or it was cool, we saw it at Black Hat, or like, or whatever, right? And so what happened was our repository was getting really big. We couldn't decide what tools should be on the default install and which ones should apt get. And so there was a lot of tools that just don't work, right? And a lot of the ones we removed were great tools like 5 years ago, right? But like they're not even like, you know, like valid anymore, right? Like those devices don't exist, or the Perl libraries it needs don't exist, or it was Python 2 point something a long time ago, you know, or whatever. So we removed a lot of stuff. This is minor, but we've always had people complain about VLC running as root, and so we got that going for them. We greatly increased the Bluetooth support to support all the Ubertooth devices. All of this stuff is compiled for that in advance. Lots more wireless support. Our main user base is probably wireless with Backtrack and Kali, so we like to cover as many wireless devices as possible. There weren't a whole ton of new tools that we added. There were some. The only one I could think of off the top of my head when we were writing this presentation that's actually super cool is the iCat, which is a kiosk attack tool. If nobody knows about it, it's super awesome. You know, when you go to a kiosk, basically all you have is a web browser, right? They take away everything. Well, this is a web server that you can set up, and you can browse to it with the kiosk, and it will conduct all kinds of attacks on the web browser and get you access to the kiosk. I've probably used it 10 or 11 times. It's probably worked 10 or 11 times. Another main thing we did was accessibility improvements. We had a couple of blind pen testers contact us right after we released Kali, and they were like, this sucks, we can't use it. And we were like, why? And they were like, we're blind. And we realized that we didn't even know that the accessibility, you know, we had never had anybody ask, right? So we never even made sure that worked. So that was something cool. You know, I don't know how many, you know, blind or hearing impaired or whatever pen testers there are, however, it works. And something else that we never got working properly was full language support. So now when you select install in Chinese, it actually works. So some other new things. We always had a complaint that you couldn't install from the boot menu. Anybody that knows Linux really well knows that a normal distribution, as soon as you put the disk in, you can install either graphical or live from the boot menu. So we always had to take Ubuntu's installer and hack it up and make it do what we want. I don't know if you ever installed Backtrack, but if you notice it goes step 1, step 2, step 3, step 7, because we cut out all those internal steps, right? So we always had to hack up their installer. And so something that was cool was we got all of this going, and Raphael helped us do this. And this may not seem like a big deal to everybody. Yes?
I was just gonna ask, does it install on VMware and stuff like that?
Yes, absolutely. It does. Did you not get that working?
Oh no, that's no problem, brother.
Oh, yeah. So it installs. I'm just going to highlight, people might be going, this is not a big deal, but it is really difficult to hack up one of these installers to install as only root. I promise you. Because most Linux distributions install as a user, right? But we run Backtrack as root. So we had to make this so that it didn't ask you about installing a user and it only installed in root, which is difficult. So we went to the Debian Wheezy base, right? Wheezy is the newest version of Debian. A couple reasons for this. Once again, I don't want to get into distro wars. I just love Linux, you know, whatever. But Debian has a lot lighter system requirements than Ubuntu does, right? People say Ubuntu's bloated and a big giant, whatever. You know, that may be, but Debian is a lot lighter system requirements. The reason for that is that we want to keep the live CD feel, right? We want people, although most people install this and run it on their computer, and nowadays in the days of, you know, 16 gigs of RAM and quad-core processors and all that nonsense, it's not as critical. However, there are times when I break in somewhere and, you know, all they have is Pentium 4 computers because it's in, you know, Saudi Arabia or something, and I need a Backtrack live CD and I want to be able to put it in and I want it to work. I only want it to need a gig of RAM if, you know, I'm not going to be running any giant applications, but I want it to work, so. Backwards compatibility. Everybody's really familiar with apt-get. We wanted to stay with apt-get, right? Moving to an entirely new package management system was just going to confuse everybody. And so we wanted to stay with apt-get. We knew how to build packages. We knew our repositories were sort of set up for that. We also wanted to, it's easily customizable, right? Debian has a whole bunch of bleeding edge repos. And the reason for that is because what happens is somebody comes out with a pen test tool and it needs some type of bleeding edge library, right? And so Ubuntu is quick to put those things into production without a lot of testing. Did I say that? Anyway, so that wasn't really an issue, but what the issue was with Debian is they like to keep their base nice and solid and working, right? And so then they have experimental repos. So the reason that worked for us is because what we can do is we can pull the package from the experimental repo, we can make it suit the way that we want it to, and then we can put it in our repo and overwrite the Debian library if we need to. So it was really easily customizable for us. The other thing that we wanted to do is we actually did not want to change the desktop experience all that much, right? We wanted to change everything under the hood, but we wanted the user who was familiar with Backtrack to still be able to boot it up and get pretty much the same experience, right? Drag in, menu bar, GNOME, the whole 9 yards or whatever. And the Debian Wheezy base is a lot smaller inside. Another big complaint we had was that the Ubuntu Live CD was like 4-point-something gigs and it barely even fit on a DVD, right? And so Debian is down to like 2.2, back to 2.2. It still won't fit on a CD, but it's a lot smaller. I'll just go over this really quick. This is some of the technical infrastructure that we rebuilt, right? So we rebuilt everything to be Debian compliant, exactly like Debian does it. We used all of the same tools. We used all of the same stuff. The ISO images are built with live build. Every bug fix that we create or that we get from the community, we actually submit to Debian if it's a Debian package. We moved to Git, and the repositories are managed with Gitolite, which is all SSH key-based stuff, GPG signing. So, and this is just some other stuff. We synchronize our mirrors with Debian 4 times a day to get security updates. So every time there's a security update from Debian, within several hours, it'll be available on our distro. That was another big deal. And then our ARM build Debians, right? So Offensive Security actually forked out the money for this Calyx and ARM build bot, right? So it builds the images really quickly. And it can build the ARM-EL and the ARM-HF images. And I'll show you that in a minute. Another big thing, Metasploit integration. So traditionally, Metasploit has, the Rapid7 guys have created a binary installer. I'm sure at least some people in here have installed Metasploit. It's one of the biggest pen testing attack frameworks that there is. And so it's a pretty big deal. Everybody uses it. I use it all the time. And but the problem is that they didn't really support anybody's distro. They said, we have a binary installer. Here it is. Good luck, basically, right? And so you would have all these database issues and stuff. So we contacted them and we were like, it was our biggest headache. And so we contacted them and we were like, look, what can we do to fix this, right? And they were super into it. Rapid7's an awesome company. They said, tell you what, we'll create our own Debian packages ourselves, and we'll create our own Debian repository. We'll run our own big bug fixes. We'll basically do everything for you, and we'll take care of it. And so, and then there was some, you put your logo here, I'll put my logo here nonsense or whatever, but basically it's official support, right? So this is the big thing, is that now there's an official Debian package that's built to work on Kali Linux. Everything works out of the box, and there's no more database nonsense or library nonsense or any of that kind of stuff. The other cool thing is that if you do find an issue with that package, they have a bug tracker on Metasploit. You write on there, and they have an entire development team that actually gets paid, unlike us, to fix that kind of stuff, right? So it gets fixed really quickly. Also, you do not have to update MSF update or whatever you have to do or whatever. Now when you apt-get updated, updates Metasploit for you. Biggest question we ever have, what happened to my pen test directory? So basically, like I already talked about a little bit, the pen test directory was a violation of the file system hierarchy standard, right? You are not allowed to add a new root directory to Linux and have them, that basically the purists were saying this is not Linux because it's not right? It has an extra directory. Now, when Backtrack was a lot smaller and we were just a bunch of hackers, building tools and using it or whatever, we really didn't care, but there was a point when we're like, hey, we need to turn this thing from a live CD into a full-fledged distribution. And the reason for that is that even though we recommend against using it as your desktop OS, there's tons of people that do. I go places everywhere and people are, using it with open office and mail and all kinds of nonsense, running as root, or whatever. So since people are going to do that anyway, we decided to try to make it a little bit better for them to do that, right? Whatever. Anyway, so other problem, it was difficult to locate tools, right? And the reason, I never experienced this a lot. The reason is because I built a bunch of those tools and I know where they're at, right? But I started to think about, if you don't really know where those at, and the reason we did that was to make it easier to find them. But what we realized was that the majority of people are using the menu anyway, right, to find the tools. They're not CDing directly to the directory unless, they already know where the stuff is. Me, I do that. But the majority of people use the menu. So we decided if the menu is set up properly with everything in the right sections, then the need for the pen test directory might go away. And then the other reason is because tools to be in the path, right? So now when you type the name of your tool, it comes right up, whatever directory you're in. That's how the path works, right? And so we were never able to add a path to the pen test directory. At one time, we tried to put every pen test folder in the path. Not a good idea. So basically now everything's where it should be. Bin, USR lib. This makes all of our library and dependency headaches a whole lot better. And so that dramatically simplifies the development process. Yeah, that's good for me. The reason that's good for you is that we can build more packages and update more tools, and it doesn't take us as long to actually do the stuff because we're not fooling around with, I don't know if anyone develops in Linux, but if you got a program that needs 8 libraries and none of them are in the path because you've got it in the pen test directory, you've got to make a symlink to every single library, and then you got to do all this nonsense, and so we've cut all of that out. So this is a hard transition for some people. A lot of people are really, really used to the pen test directory, but I don't have anything to say, but suck it up, really. So anyway, the next big thing that we changed is the bug tracker. And I know this is not really all that cool. Everybody's seen a bug tracker. The reason that I put this slide in there is I really, really, really want to iterate that nobody on the Backtrack project gets paid. Everybody has a real job and wife and family and kids and all that kind of stuff. So basically, we don't have all day to chase down every single issue on the distro. So it's what we call community driven, right? It's only as good as the community puts into it. And so that's why I want to highlight the bug tracker and all of these issues. That what happens is, and I see this all the time, is that a lot of people, you go out on a project, you boot up Backtrack, something doesn't work, you throw in a quick one-liner to fix it, and you go on with your work. And then it never gets submitted and it never gets fixed, right? Then you get on IRC and complain about how Backtrack sucks and this is broken, but you never submitted your fix, right? So this thing is really important, right? I don't care how small it is. If it's a typo or whatever, throw it up here, we'll fix it. And so that's important to me, because I hate hearing people complain about something and I'm like, well, did you submit a bug fix? And they're like, well, no, I just fixed it myself. Well, that doesn't help anybody. The next big thing we added was the bleeding edge repositories. So this was our answer to tools like set, for example, that Dave updates every day, right? And so sometimes 2 or 3 times a day. So we needed an answer for this, right? Because there's nothing worse. This just happened to me recently. There's nothing worse than reading about a new exploit and metasploit online, getting to your job with no internet access and realizing that you forgot to update it before you left, right? So this was our answer to this. This is super experimental, right? This is an automated build process, so it's super experimental. It's gotten better than when we first put it out, but basically what this does is this is an extra repository, and these particular tools right here are automatically updated every single day. And so basically it's still up to you to do the whole apt-get update thing. Metasploit isn't listed here because they do that themselves, right? But it's updated too. But SQL map's a big one, W3AF. Anyway, so because this is experimental, it's not in the default sources list. So basically, I don't know if you can see this. This stuff is all on the website too. This is nothing new or revolutionary. But anyway, so you just add the bleeding edge repos to your installation and you'll get those updates. And we're gonna be adding more tools to this. This is just what we started with. We wanted to make sure it worked. We didn't want to add 1 million tools right away. There's probably about 10 more tools that I'd like to add to this, but so those are coming. The big thing is the ARM architecture. I don't know how many people do physical pen testing, social engineering, that kind of thing, but the days of carrying a giant 17-inch laptop, like sneaking in the door, are over. Like, everybody heard of the pawn plug? Couple people. Okay, so the pawn plug is an ARM-based device. Basically, the goal is to get the smallest device possible with the most processing power that you can hide on somebody's network and they can't see it, right? So what we wanted to do is support as many of those devices as possible. So what we also wanted to do, so we bought the cluster, right, so that we could build our own ARM images. So and I'll show you in a second, so you can go to the website and select the ARM image, the device that you want to build it on and all that kind of stuff, and we'll build it for you. But the thing is that there's so many of these ARM devices, right, that it's kind of hard for us to build on everything, right? We don't have people sending us Chromebooks and tablets and stuff all over the place. So we're limited by what we have and what we can afford. So another thing that we wanted was to show people how to build a ARM cross-compiling environment on their computer and not actually need an ARM device for the compiling process. So all of that is on our docs.cali.org site. So basically, you can get on your computer, you can set up an ARM build environment, you can download one of our images, you can CH-root into it, and then do whatever customizations you want to run it on whatever ARM architecture you want and build an image. And all of that is documented on there. I was actually going to try to show some of that, but it would just take too long. But it's super cool if you're into ARM devices. Some of the ones that we do support that we already have images built on the website for are the Galaxy, the Chromebook, the SaneSmart. I've never used that. The Odroid, which is my favorite piece of ARM equipment in the world, and I got a whole other slide about it because it's so awesome. And then the Raspberry Pi. Yes. Was that your Raspberry Pi? You're not going to want that anymore after you see the Odroid.
Oh, I've seen it. The price difference, though, is...
Yeah, well, yeah, the price difference. There's a little price difference. So this is the Odroid. I just want to feature this real quick because this thing is so awesome. The way this came about was that Eric and I did a physical pen test, and we have a lot of Palm plugs. We love those guys. We support them. Great friends. The problem with the Palm plug that we found out was that when you plug it into a network with 26,000 hosts, it's a little bit difficult to do your pen test unless you know where everything is. So we broke into a place. We set up a Palm plug. We threw that in there. Once you put Metasploit and all that stuff on it, you're sort of limited on space after that. And so there was a lot of challenges with it. And so they're going a different, they're putting out the Palm Pad, and they have this new enterprise system or whatever. So they were going a little bit of a different direction. And so Eric and I looked into researching other stuff. And so we looked into this Odroid thing. And this thing is really small. I mean, it's about this big. The reason that we like it is that black part is works as a heat sink, but it's also the case. And so you put some double-sided sticky tape on that thing and stick it up under somebody's desk, and they're never going to see it again. I've got several of them in place currently that haven't been found. And so the other reason that we really like this thing is because it has a 1.7 gigahertz quad-core processor. It can actually do some computations. And the other thing that we really like is it has 2 gigs of memory. I think even the biggest Raspberry Pi only has 512, right? And so we found that really limiting for some tools. And the main reason is for an enterprise networks, right? Because you have to do discovery and Nmap scans and all this kind of stuff. And so we were trying to scan /16s with our Palm plug, and it was taking an extremely long time, and it didn't really work for us. So anyway, I just wanted to feature that. If anybody does this kind of pen testing, this thing is freaking awesome.
Doesn't have gigabit?
It does not have gigabit. That's its only downfall, but it does have 6 USB ports, and it will take a gigabit USB to Ethernet connector. No, so it does require a power cable. What I did to get over that, it does have a power cable that sticks in the side, and I'm always paranoid about those falling out. So what I did was I soldered the power cables on. Because the thing is that the entire contraption costs like $150. But I mean, if you're on $50,000 engagements, I mean, who cares? You're going to lose it anyway. So I just rip all that off and I solder the power cable on there so there's no chance of it falling out. All right, so what else is new? These are just a couple of little things. I already talked about the repository gets updated 4 times a day. The other thing is that the source and patches and every possible thing you could possibly want for every tool is available on Git. So if you have your own patch and you try to give it to us and we say that's nonsense, you can just grab the tool and recompile it yourself and patch it, right? And a lot of this stuff is not revolutionary, it's just normal Linux, but it's not stuff that we were doing because we never thought Backtrack would get as big as it was, right? We were just making something that was like cool for us to use on engagements, right? And we had no idea that it was gonna turn into what it did, and so we had to, like I said, get some of our stuff back to regular Linux so that it made sense. There's another big reason for this is that another thing that we found is one of the things on our wish list was that when I go on engagements, a lot of times small to medium-sized companies don't have their own security team, and they may have one or two guys that does security, but he always does something else, and he doesn't have like a whole lot of time to devote, or he or she, I'm sorry, I'm being sexist, but anyway, so they don't have a lot of time to devote to like building this, really great, super good pen test distro, because anybody that maintains their own stuff knows that there's a lot of work involved. So we wanted to make something that was what we like to call enterprise ready. So like when you got the guy that's the database administrator, and he's also the security guy, and he's also the Twitter guy or something, right? And he doesn't have all this time. He can just boot this up. All the tools are where they're supposed to be. As long as he knows how to use Linux a little bit, he'll be able to find all the tools. He doesn't have to go, what the hell is this pen test directory? They've totally messed up Linux, and so like that's one of the things is that like it's more geared towards people that don't know pen testing, right? So we used to build Backtrack for the hardcore pen testers and try to make it. But what we found is that like most super hardcore pen testers like to maintain their own image, right? So we wanted to make something that would help organizations just a little bit better, be easier to use, easier to implement. So one of the other reasons we fixed the whole PXE boot with pre-seed files, right? This is kind of minor, but if you have a gigantic organization and you want to install Backtrack, like, on every VLAN, for example, whatever, you can do that now. And then the main thing was to seamlessly upgrade future major releases. So we don't want people to have to reinstall anymore, and the Debian architecture allows us to do that. So now we can push out new versions, new kernels, new everything. It comes down, it fixes, it works because all the files are in the right place. So people always ask me about this, new tool requests, right? So one of the things that's really challenging about running something like this is weighing new tools versus size versus does that really work? Traditionally in the past, we would put the default tool for something, like DNS, like Dimitri or something like that's sort of a default DNS tool, right? But then we would have one of our friends call us and be like, dude, I just wrote the baddest new DNS tool, and you'd be like, oh, okay, we'll put that in there because we're friends or whatever. But then you end up with 2, 3, 4, and 5 tools that all have the same functionality, and you confuse people. And then what happens is like every class teaches a different tool, or everybody uses a different tool, and like it becomes a little bit skewed. And so we wanted to get away from that. So if you're making a new tool request, is the tool useful in a pen testing function environment? We totally encourage people to do this because there's so many pen testing tools out there that there's no way the 4 or 5 of us, or however small it is, can keep up with it all, right? So like we rely on people to submit new tools. So is it functional in a penetration testing environment, right? That goes down to my 4th bullet point here. Tools that do DOS, DDoS, and anonymity like Tor, all that kind of stuff. What we found is that I'd never use any of that nonsense on a legitimate pen test, right? The people that ask for that type of stuff are probably doing something that they shouldn't be doing. So we decided not to include any of that kind of stuff, right? I've had like one legitimate use for Tor in years or whatever, but I figure if it comes to that, you can just install it yourself, right? So, basically, and then ask yourself, does the tool contain the functionality of other tools already? That's the main thing that happens is that, so-and-so writes a tool, so-and-so writes a tool, so-and-so writes a tool, then you get so-and-so steals all 3 of their code and writes their own tool, right, and releases it. Unfortunately, there's a lot of this type of stuff on the internet. So does it already do the functionality of an existing tool? And like I said, I'd rather have an existing tool that's been working for like 10 years than some brand new buggy bleeding edge, Python script or whatever. So another big thing we want to look at is resources, right? Because we have these ARM devices, we don't want to put any big resource intensive tools that we don't need on Kali, because we really want it to work from an ARM device. And then basically you can make these new tool requests on the bug website. There's a little drop down, you just say new tool request and we'll review it. I highly recommend trying to answer these questions in your actual thing. And then most importantly, I'll link to the tool. Some people miss that part. So anyway, we got a pretty strong community. One of the things we revamped was the entire community. We got a new forums, we got a new IRC channel, got a new Twitter, we're even on Facebook, and we got a blog, right? And so these are all the places that you can go to get official information. You definitely have to be careful, because something that comes with being such a big popular distro is there's a lot of what I like to call biters. That's an 80s term. Anyway, so there's a lot of people. So if you go out there, there's like KaliLinux.net, KaliLinux. Whatever, Kali-Linux. So you have to be really careful that you're actually looking on like an official website. Now, whether those other guys' information, it's probably fine. I don't know, but take it with a grain of salt, right? We didn't write it, so I don't know if it works or not. So that was a big problem that we had with Backtrack, was people would get unofficial information. Some of us are always in the IRC channel. You can always send us an email, any of that kind of stuff, and we're really trying to answer all of those questions personally and that type of thing. So that's it. That's all I got. I know it wasn't technical. This is the first time I've ever given a non-technical presentation without demos and stuff, so it feels kind of weird, but does anybody have any questions I can answer? Yes?
Yeah, about that particular Odroid module, it doesn't have any issues with stressing, say, USB?
No. What do you mean stressing USB?
Because with the Raspberry Pi, you throw fair enough amount of stuff on the USB.
No, that's one of the reasons I like it, is it comes pre-configured with 6 USB ports, and it's built to support them all.
Okay, because
Yeah, it's not like adding like a bunch of adapters with more USBs. Now, obviously, if you put like a big 7-port USB hub on there, you might have some issues, but if you use the 6 that come on it, you should be fine. I've got one that's got a USB to Ethernet, a GSM card, and a wireless card all plugged into it, and it's running fine right now, currently. Well, it was this morning. I mean, could all go south while I'm talking, but any more questions? Yes.
You said there's improved support for the Ubertooth.
Yes.
Also,
So basically, the tools were not compiled. So stuff like Kismet had to be specifically compiled. And so I'll just be totally honest, when we were building all those tools, we forgot about the Ubertooth, because me, honestly, I don't do a lot of Bluetooth pen testing. There may be like other people that do, but we just don't have a lot of call for it, right? I mean, like, I've done some Bluetooth sniffing and like maybe got some BlackBerry stuff, but they're over a lot of that. But we just don't have a call for it. I don't know if that's because it hasn't become a big attack surface yet, or so I forget about stuff like that. So as soon as we released the first image, we had a bunch of emails that were like, "What about the Ubertooth support?" And we're like, So basically, all it is that we have better Bluetooth drivers on Debian, and then we also have the stuff is actually built to work out of the box with the Ubertooth rather than recompiling it.
okay.
Anybody else? Cool. Well, thanks everybody for listening to me. I appreciate it.